Thanks.
Here, let me get this. Oh. Where's the man from the backwoods?
Oh, God. We got separated at customs.
Crocodile Dundee wasn't just an Australian fish-out-of-water comedy. It was a cultural phenomenon that transformed Australia's international image and launched one of cinema's most unlikely global superstars. But behind Paul Hogan's charismatic grin and knife-wielding bravado lay a production fraught with financial gambles, dangerous wildlife encounters, and a leading man who had never acted in a feature film before. From crocodile wranglers who nearly lost limbs to New York locals who thought Hogan was actually a bushman, the making of this accidental blockbuster was as wild as the outback itself. Here are 20 weird facts about Crocodile Dundee that will make you see this 80s classic in a whole new light. And stick around for our bonus fact, the shocking truth about the real-life inspiration behind the character that the filmmakers never wanted you to know. Let's dive into the billabong of Hollywood secrets. Paul Hogan bet his entire life savings on Crocodile Dundee's success. Before Crocodile Dundee, Paul Hogan wasn't an actor. He was a maintenance worker on the Sydney Harbour Bridge who accidentally stumbled into comedy on Australian talent show New Faces. But Hogan didn't just star in Crocodile Dundee. He mortgaged his house, invested his life savings, and convinced Australian investors to back what Hollywood studios dismissed as a movie no American would understand. When U.S. distributors showed little interest, Hogan personally funded a theatrical release in just 4 Los Angeles theaters. The gamble paid off spectacularly. Those 4 screenings sold out for weeks, creating a bidding war among studios that Paramount eventually won. The film cost $8.8 million to make and went on to earn over $328 million worldwide, making it the second highest grossing film of 1986 behind Top Gun. The famous knife wasn't actually that big. The actor holding it was just small. The iconic "That's not a knife" scene features what appears to be a massive Bowie knife. In reality, the knife was a fairly standard hunting blade that appeared enormous because actor David Gulpilil, who played the mugger wielding the small switchblade, was only 5'4". Hogan, standing at 6'2", made the knife look proportional in his hand. The production team tested several knife sizes before settling on one that would create the perfect visual contrast without looking cartoonish. The knife became so iconic that the Smithsonian Museum requested it for their collection, but there was a problem. The production had used 7 identical knives during filming. 6 were given as gifts to crew members, and the 7th went missing. The knife in the Smithsonian today is actually a replica created by the original prop maker specifically for the museum display. The crocodile wrestling scene nearly killed a crew member. The intense scene where Dundee wrestles a crocodile wasn't movie magic. It involved a real 15-foot saltwater crocodile. Though the close-ups featured a mechanical crocodile head, the wide shots used a sedated but still dangerous live animal. During rehearsal, the crocodile unexpectedly snapped out of its sedated state, clamping down on a wrangler's leg. The man was rushed to a remote medical station with severe lacerations. The production shut down for 3 days while they determined whether to continue with live animals. Insurance underwriters threatened to pull coverage, but Hogan insisted the authenticity was crucial. They eventually proceeded with additional safety measures, including 4 armed marksmen just off camera ready to shoot the animal if necessary. Paul Hogan later admitted, "Every day in the outback was like playing Russian roulette with the wildlife. I'm still not sure how we got through it without a fatality." Linda Kozlowski and Paul Hogan fell in love during filming, but kept it secret. When filming began, Paul Hogan was still married to his first wife, Noeline, while Linda Kozlowski was a virtually unknown American actress. The chemistry between them wasn't just good acting. By the time principal photography wrapped, they had fallen deeply in love but kept their relationship completely hidden from the cast and crew. Director Peter Feynman later revealed he had no idea they were involved until after production ended. The The revelation of their affair created a media frenzy in Australia, where Hogan was considered a national treasure. Their relationship led to Hogan's highly publicized divorce from Noeline, his wife of 27 years, reportedly resulting in one of the largest divorce settlements in Australian history. Despite public backlash, Hogan and Kozlowski married in 1990 and remained together for 23 years before divorcing in 2013. Kozlowski later stated, "The hardest part wasn't falling in love. It was being vilified as a home wrecker in a country where Paul was practically a national symbol." The New York scenes were almost entirely improvised due to permit issues. When the production moved to New York, they quickly discovered their limited budget couldn't cover the expensive permits required for filming on Manhattan streets. Instead of scrapping key scenes, director Peter Feynman adopted guerrilla filmmaking tactics. Many of the famous New York sequences were shot without permits, using hidden cameras and a skeleton crew. The production team would quickly set up shots, film a take or two, then pack up and move before authorities arrived. Real New Yorkers' reactions to Hogan's outlandish behavior were often genuine, as passersby had no idea they were walking through a film set. The famous scene where Dundee climbs a statue in Central Park was filmed at 5 a.m. with lookouts positioned to warn of approaching police. When security did spot them, the crew pretended to be tourists taking photos. This guerrilla approach lent the New York scenes an authenticity that couldn't have been achieved on closed sets, with real New Yorkers becoming unwitting extras in many scenes. The film was originally titled The Crocodile Man and was conceived as a serious drama. Hogan's original concept for the film was dramatically different from the comedy that reached theaters. The initial screenplay, titled The Crocodile Man, was a serious dramatic character study about an Australian bushman confronting the modern world. The script featured darker themes, including Dundee's PTSD from a crocodile attack and his struggles with alcoholism. Early drafts contained minimal humor and ended with Dundee returning to Australia alone, unable to adapt to American life. Test readings of this version left investors concerned, with one Australian backer famously saying, "This isn't the Paul Hogan people want to see." Under pressure, Hogan rewrote the script in just 2 weeks, injecting his trademark humor while maintaining the fish-out-of-water premise. The title Crocodile Dundee came from a Paramount executive who thought the original title sounded like a National Geographic special. Hogan later confessed, "The movie everyone loves was basically my plan B. My serious film about Australian identity got buried under jokes about bidets." Numerous Indigenous actors refused roles, calling the script cultural exploitation. The production faced significant backlash from Aboriginal Australian actors and cultural consultants during pre-production. Several prominent Indigenous performers turned down roles after reading the script, citing concerns about stereotypical portrayals and cultural insensitivity. David Gulpilil, who eventually took a small role as a mugger in the New York scenes, initially declined to participate. He changed his mind only after being allowed to rewrite his character's dialogue. The original script contained several scenes featuring Aboriginal characters that were ultimately cut after consultations with elders who deemed them disrespectful. To address these concerns, Hogan hired Aboriginal cultural advisors and made significant script revisions. Despite these efforts, the film has been criticized for its portrayal of Indigenous Australians and for appropriating elements of Aboriginal culture for comedic effect. Years later, Hogan acknowledged these criticisms, stating, "The 80s were a different time, but that's not an excuse. If I made the film today, I'd approach those elements very differently." The famous bidet scene was based on Paul Hogan's real experience in a Paris hotel. The scene where Dundee mistakes a bidet for a drinking fountain or foot-washing basin ranks among the film's most memorable moments. What audiences didn't know was that this wasn't just comedy writing, it was autobiographical. Before his television career took off, Hogan took his first international trip to Paris in 1973. Staying in a modest hotel that was far more luxurious than anything he was accustomed to, he encountered a bidet for the first time. According to production designer Brian Thompson, Paul told me he actually did wash his socks. In it, thinking it was some kind of fancy European sink for small items? When Hogan shared this embarrassing story with the crew during pre-production, everyone agreed it had to go into the film. The bidet manufacturer later reported a significant uptick in sales following the film's release, with their marketing team crediting the Dundee effect for introducing millions of Americans to the European bathroom fixture. The water buffalo scene caused a real-life international incident. One of the film's most controversial moments occurs when Dundee calmly shoots a water buffalo that's blocking the road. This scene wasn't created with special effects. It featured actual footage of a water buffalo being shot, filmed years earlier for a documentary. When animal rights activists discovered this, international protests erupted. The footage was pulled from UK and German releases, while the ASPCA filed formal complaints against Paramount in the United States. The controversy escalated to diplomatic levels when Australia's tourism minister had to publicly assure international visitors that shooting wildlife was not an accepted practice. Hogan was blindsided by the backlash, stating in a 1987 interview, "I never expected people to get so worked up about a buffalo. In the outback, sometimes you have to make tough choices about dangerous animals." The scene remains one of the most controversial moments in 1980s cinema and is often edited out of television broadcasts to this day. Hogan couldn't perform the famous subway scene due to severe claustrophobia. Remember that scene where Dundee walks across the heads and shoulders of subway passengers to reach Sue? That wasn't Paul Hogan. The actor suffered from severe claustrophobia and had a panic attack when they attempted to film him in the crowded subway car. After 3 unsuccessful takes, the production brought in a stunt double, Hogan's real-life brother, Kevin, who performed the famous crowd surfing scene. The camera carefully avoids showing the stunt double's face, and Hogan only appears in close-ups, filmed later against a green screen. Director Peter Feynman noted, "It's cinema's great trick, making you believe you saw something you actually didn't. 99% of viewers have no idea that's not Paul walking on those people." Go ahead and like and subscribe because we're just getting to the really juicy secrets about this Aussie classic. The shocking facts about the filming of Crocodile Dundee's famous bathing scene and the legal battles behind the franchise are coming up next. New York actors were told Paul Hogan was a real bushman, not an actor. In a bizarre experiment, director Peter Feynman decided not to tell the American actors that Paul Hogan was Australia's biggest TV star. Instead, supporting cast members were told Hogan was a genuine bushman with no acting experience who had been discovered in the outback. This unusual approach was designed to generate authentic reactions to his strange behavior. Actor John Millen later revealed, "The Yanks thought he was some crazy crocodile hunter they'd found in a swamp. They'd speak really slowly to him between takes and explain basic things like how cameras worked." The ruse continued for nearly 3 weeks of filming until someone recognized Hogan from Australian tourism commercials. When the truth came out, several actors were reportedly furious about the deception. Hogan defended the choice. "It gave those early scenes attention you can't fake. They genuinely thought they were dealing with a madman." The famous bathing scene created a diplomatic crisis for the Australian government. The scene where journalist Sue Charlton spies on Dundee bathing naked in a billabong created unexpected diplomatic problems. After filming, Aboriginal elders from the region contacted the production to express outrage that the sacred site had been used for a scene featuring nudity. The waterhole was a men's ceremonial site with significant cultural importance, and filming there was considered deeply disrespectful. The Australian Department of Aboriginal Affairs became involved, formally censuring the production for failing to conduct proper cultural consultations. To make amends, Hogan personally funded a community center in the region and donated a percentage of Australian box office receipts to Indigenous causes. The controversy prompted the Australian Film Commission to develop the first formal protocols for filming on Indigenous lands, guidelines that remain in use today. Film historian David Stratton noted, "That one scene fundamentally changed how Australian filmmakers approach Indigenous sacred sites, creating accountability that simply didn't exist before." The studio tried to dub over Hogan's accent for American audiences. After initial test screenings in the United States, Paramount executives panicked when audience feedback forms revealed that Americans had difficulty understanding Hogan's thick Australian accent. Without informing Hogan or director Peter Feynman, the studio secretly commissioned American voice actor James Earl Jones to re-record several of Dundee's more slang-heavy lines. When Hogan discovered the plan, he threatened to withdraw promotional support for the film, a significant threat given his popularity from the successful Come to Australia tourism campaign. The dubbing idea was abandoned, but as a compromise, Hogan re-recorded certain lines himself, toning down his accent and replacing Australian colloquialisms with more universally understood terms. The controversy led to the creation of the first ever Australian slang glossary, which was distributed to American theater owners to help answer audience questions. Hogan later joked, "I nearly had Darth Vader's voice coming out of my mouth. That would have been a different movie entirely." Linda Kozlowski was cast after 300 other actresses were rejected. The search for Sue Charlton was one of the most extensive casting processes of the 1980s. Over 300 actresses auditioned for the role, including future stars Gina Davis, Ali Sheedy, and Melanie Griffith. The production team initially wanted a major star to balance Hogan's unknown status in America, with Kathleen Turner and Jamie Lee Curtis both considered for the part. When the budget couldn't accommodate an established star's salary, the search expanded to Broadway performers. Kozlowski, who had only appeared in one previous film and was primarily a stage actress, was initially rejected after her first audition. Casting director Diane Crittenden fought for her to have a second reading with Hogan present. Their chemistry was immediately apparent, with Hogan reportedly telling Feynman after the audition, "She's the one. If she doesn't play Sue, I'm not making the movie." In a 1987 interview, Kozlowski revealed, "I was so broke when I auditioned that I had to borrow money for the bus fare to the studio. If I hadn't gotten that second chance, I'd probably have given up acting entirely." The film's entire marketing budget was spent on a single Super Bowl commercial. In one of the riskiest marketing decisions in film history, Paramount spent their entire promotional budget for Crocodile Dundee on a single 30-second Super Bowl commercial in January 1986. The ad, which featured the now famous "That's Not a Knife" scene, cost nearly $1 million, an unprecedented amount for a film with an unknown international star. This all-or-nothing strategy was fiercely debated within the studio, with several executives arguing it would doom the film to obscurity. The gamble paid off spectacularly. The commercial generated such intense audience interest that Paramount was flooded with calls from theater owners requesting the film. The studio had originally planned a limited release in 400 theaters, but audience demand pushed them to expand to over 1,000 screens for opening weekend. Marketing executive Gordon Weaver later called it the most efficient dollar-for-dollar film promotion in Paramount's history. The success established the Super Bowl as prime real estate for movie marketing, a practice that continues today. Hogan refused to do any of the standard press junket interviews. In an unprecedented move that horrified studio executives, Paul Hogan refused to participate in the standard press junket for the film. Instead of sitting for dozens of brief interviews with entertainment journalists, Hogan insisted on appearing exclusively on popular talk shows where he could have extended conversations. This approach went against all standard Hollywood marketing practices of the time. Paramount threatened to withhold international distribution if Hogan didn't comply with publicity requirements, but the actor held firm. His unconventional approach worked brilliantly. His appearances on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson were so successful that Carson invited him back 3 times in a single month, an honor never before granted to a first-time film actor. Carson's enthusiastic endorsement of the film is often credited with driving its initial success. Studio marketing executive Martin Davis later acknowledged, "Hogan rewrote our publicity playbook. He understood his appeal better than our entire marketing department." This approach to film publicity, focusing on in-depth talk show appearances rather than junkets, has since become common practice for major stars. Australian tourism increased 300% within a year of the film's release. No film has ever had as profound an impact on a country's tourism industry as Crocodile Dundee had on Australia. In the year following the film's release, tourism to Australia increased by an astonishing 300%, with American visitors specifically citing the movie as their inspiration for making the trip. The Australian Tourism Commission seized on the phenomenon, hiring Hogan to appear in a series of commercials inviting Americans to visit, with the now famous tagline, "I'll slip another shrimp on the Barbie for you." The film's impact was so significant that in 1988, Australia's Minister for Tourism presented Hogan with a special award, crediting him with a $1.2 billion boost to the national economy. Northern Territory tour operators began offering Dundee adventures, taking visitors to filming locations and teaching them outback survival skills. Ironically, most of the Australian outback scenes were actually filmed near Kakadu National Park, not in the regions where real crocodile hunters operated. Australian tourism officials didn't correct this misconception, however, as Kakadu was more accessible to visitors than the remote areas where actual crocodile hunting occurred. The sequel was secretly filmed at the same time as the original. In one of Hollywood's best-kept secrets of the 1980s, approximately 20 minutes of footage for Crocodile Dundee Thusandu was filmed concurrently with the original movie, even though no sequel had been officially greenlit. Paul Hogan, confident the film would be successful enough to warrant a follow-up, convinced director Peter Feynman to shoot additional scenes while they had access to remote Australian locations and permits. This footage was kept secret from Paramount executives who would have considered it an unauthorized use of production resources. When the original film became a massive hit and the studio rushed to commission a sequel, Hogan revealed he already had a significant portion of the Australian scenes completed. This gave the production team a considerable head start, allowing Crocodile Dundee to reach theaters just 19 months after the original, an unusually quick turnaround for a major film sequel in that era. Film historian Leonard Maltin noted, "It was a brilliant bit of foresight. Hogan essentially created a sequel insurance policy before anyone even knew if the first film would succeed." The film's success destroyed Paul Hogan's marriage and nearly ended his career. The overwhelming success of Crocodile Dundee had a devastating personal cost for Paul Hogan. The sudden global fame, combined with his developing relationship with co-star Linda Kozlowski, led to the collapse of his 27-year marriage to Noeline Edwards. The divorce became a tabloid sensation in Australia, where Hogan had been viewed as a national treasure and family man. Public opinion turned sharply against him, with Australian media outlets that had once celebrated his success now portraying him as a villain who had abandoned his family for Hollywood glamour. The backlash was so severe that Hogan temporarily relocated to Los Angeles, unable to walk freely in his homeland without harassment. His next film, Almost an Angel, 1990, was targeted by Australian critics and performed poorly at the box office, with some theater chains in Australia refusing to show it. Longtime friend and colleague John Cornell observed, "Success didn't change Paul, it changed everyone around him. Suddenly, the guy who could do no wrong could do nothing right." The personal and professional fallout lasted years, with Hogan later reflecting, "I went from national hero to national villain overnight, all because of a bloody movie about a bloke with a big knife." The "that's not a knife" scene wasn't in the original script. The film's most iconic moment, the "that's not a knife" scene, wasn't in any version of the shooting script. During a break in filming on the streets of New York, Hogan was approached by a local who tried to sell him a switchblade. Amused, Hogan improvised a response similar to what would become the famous line. Director Peter Feynman overheard the exchange and immediately recognized its potential. That evening, Feynman and Hogan rewrote the mugging scene to incorporate the improvised dialogue. They quickly secured permits for the alley location and shot the scene the following day, with actor David Gulpilil hastily cast as the lead mugger. The scene was shot in just 2 takes, with minimal rehearsal. In post-production, it was nearly cut for pacing reasons until test audiences identified it as their favorite moment in the film. The line has since been ranked among the American Film Institute's 100 greatest movie quotes of all time, despite being written on the back of a napkin just hours before it was filmed. Hogan later said, "The best bits in movies often happen by accident. If that bloke hadn't tried to sell me a knife on my lunch break, movie history would be very different." Though Paul Hogan long maintained that Mick Dundee was a fictional composite character, the truth was more complicated. In 1988, Australian bushman Rodney Ansell filed a lawsuit against Hogan and the production company, claiming the character was based on his life. Ansell had gained fame in 1977 after surviving 56 days stranded in the outback. His story became international news, and he was interviewed on Australian television, interviews that Hogan had seen. The similarities were striking. Both Ansell and the fictional Dundee had survived crocodile attacks, lived off the land, and were unfamiliar with modern conveniences. During a publicity tour in Sydney, Ansell had famously been confused by a hotel bidet, exactly like the scene in the film. Court records show that Hogan's production company settled the lawsuit out of court for an undisclosed sum, with both parties signing non-disclosure agreements. Tragically, Ansell's life took a dark turn after his brush with Hollywood. Struggling with financial problems and drug addiction, he died in 1999 in a shootout with police after killing an officer. The production team has never publicly acknowledged Ansell's influence on the character, and most Crocodile Dundee documentaries and retrospectives omit any mention of him. Film historian Robert Thompson noted, "There's a sad irony that the real bushman behind the character ended in violence and tragedy, while his Hollywood counterpart became an enduring symbol of Australian charm and resilience." Crocodile Dundee wasn't just a movie that entertained millions, it fundamentally transformed Australia's image on the world stage. Before Mick Dundee, Australia was often viewed through the lens of dreary period dramas or post-apocalyptic wastelands. After him, it became a land of rugged charm, spectacular landscapes, and irresistible characters. What began as a personal gamble by a middle-aged TV comedian became a cultural touchstone that generated billions in tourism revenue and forever changed how the world saw Australia. The film succeeded not because of its budget or special effects, but because of its heart, a quality that continues to resonate with audiences discovering it for the first time today. If you enjoyed learning about the wild, true story behind this Australian classic, hit that subscribe button and comment below with which movie's secrets you want us to reveal next. Because in Hollywood, what happens on screen is only half the story. The real drama unfolds when the cameras stop rolling.